Good morning. We are on Mem Hamed Bays 45b. And we're at the Mishnah, but halfway down the page. I'm sorry for the delay in starting today. Koshu Baila b'Meisera. The owner tied the owner tied the animal with a rope. The null b'fan of Karoi, and the door was closed correctly. Okay, and Rashi explains this is sort of a minimal watching, what we call shmira pchusa. The yotz v'hizik, and the animal went out into damage anyway. So this Mishnah goes back to a discussion we've had before, very fundamental. We spoke about this yesterday, the difference between shmira pchusa and shmira ma'ula, and we also spoke about a concept a while back called tzad tamas b'mkayim by this, and we'll review both of those now. So the first opinion is echad tam echad muad chayev divrei meir. The mayor says, let's say, for argument's sake, that a chain link fence is what we call a shmira pchusa. The literal definition here means pchusa means poor, like less. So he didn't watch it correctly. He watched it, but not the most he could have. So shmira pchusa. I remember. I think I was once in a camp. They got a phone call from a neighbor down the road. They found a horse in their backyard. Obviously, they were watching shmira pchusa. They weren't watching shmira ma'ula. They had it in a corral, but the corral didn't have electric wire, and it was too low. Maybe the animals have to jump over and run away. So Rameir says both a tam and a muad, you need shmira ma'ula. You need a good watching. You need the electric wire, with plus the fence or something like that. Rabbi Yehudah says no. Tam chayev. You're chayev on a tam because a tam requires shmira ma'ula, a good watching. Muad potter, but a muad you're exempt from the damages. Why? Because muad, Torah says shmira pchusa works. How do we know this? Shneimar, as the Torah says, referring to a muad, v'lo yishmerenu ba'olav, and the owner didn't watch it, meaning he didn't watch it at all, because even if he did a minimum amount of watching, a basic chain link fence, that would have sufficed. V'shomer who said this is watched. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Eila shmira el sakin. We saw Rabbi Elazar's opinion yesterday. The only way to watch a muad is to slaughter it. My time to Rabbi. What's the reason of Rameir? The Sava Rameir holds stam shvarim la b'cheskas shimur kaimi. So we spoke about this with regard to the definition of muad, right? And understanding. I'm sorry, not definition, the definition of tam and the understanding of how you become a muad. We had a fundamental question whether we say tam is a knas or it's mammon. Is the penalty half payment of the tam? Is it a penalty payment or is it a monetary payment? If it's a monetary payment, the Torah was generous and reduced your monetary payment. If it's a penalty payment, the Torah penalized you when you should have been paying zero. Why should you have been paying zero? Because stam shvarim b'chetzkas shimur kaimi. Because the average tam, not wild animal, won't gore. It's watched. Rameir, however, is saying no. Stam shvarim la b'chetzkas shimur kaimi. The average animal is not watched. The tam nechayev, and you violate shmira pchusa. The Torah says you have to pay for a tam. Why? Because you should have watched it. At least a minimum watching, at least a shmira pchusa. Hadar amar achmana. Then the Torah says v'lo yishmerenu gabe muad, and you violate shmira ma'ula. Then the Torah adds by muad, and you didn't watch it, meaning you didn't even watch you didn't watch the extra level. In you need to watch it, a much better watching. It has to have a very solid fence around it. Okay. So now, in other words, the Torah says that a tam requires a minimum shmira, and a muad requires an additional shmira. Okay. Rabbi Yehudah says, "Stam shvarim b'cheskas shimur kaimi." A normal shar is watched. A normal tam is watched because it's a tam. It doesn't run out and do damages. And amrachmana tam neshalom. And the Torah says that a tam does have to pay, despite the fact that it's washed, meaning it's washed without offense, because you don't expect the tam to go out and do damage. Okay. Why? Because the Torah wants you to provide for a tam a high level of watching. So now the Torah says there's a low level watching and a high level watching. There's no three levels. So now that the Torah says Gabi Muad v'lo yishmerenu, Amar Chana v'lo yishmerenu Gabi Muad, the Navid l'shmir mu'ula. Have a riboy achariboy and riboy achariboy el lamayat. Okay, so now the Torah, a tam you already need to watch a very good watching. Why? Because the Torah says you have to pay for a tam even though the animal's already washed, according to Rabbi Yehudah. So now the Torah says by Muad you have to also watch it. That's what we call a riboy achariboy. The ein riboy achariboy el lamayat. In other words, the Torah is adding something to a category that's already maxed out. That actually is a leniency, not a stringency. You're adding something to an added category. That actually tells you that you should be limiting, not adding. It's a riboy achariboy el lamayat. It excludes. The Torah says that the Torah here, by adding the category of watching to a muad, Torah in effect is telling you it actually needs a lower category. You don't need to watch a shmir mola. Shmir pchusa suffices. Okay, miyana akasav shmir mola. The Torah excludes shmir mola. V'chitem, and if you'll say negichel tam and negichel muad. 1 second. Let's say you'll say that negicha refers to both a tam and a muad. 1 second. Okay. If you'll say that we should compare the negicha, the goring of both a tam and a muad, and therefore say that a tam should also only require a shmir pchutza, there's a limitation here. So loish merenu seems to imply, and he won't watch it. Who's he? Meaning the owner of a shar hamud, not the owner of a shar tam. Specifically, the muad is exempt from shmir mula, but not tam. So the Gemara says, "I'm boile lalav." The Gemara is saying, the Gemara is asking, in other words, obviously the Torah needs to say the loish mereno to tell me that to require some level of watching. So how can you say it's a limitation? How can you say that it limits tam when you need it for itself? In other words, the loish mereno is not an extra statement. The Torah needs to say that you didn't watch a muad because you have to watch it. So the Gemara says, you're right. And he didn't watch it. What's my v'lo yishmerenu? And he, in quotations, the he didn't watch it, meaning him specifically as the owner of a muad didn't watch it. Because him specifically as the owner of a muad is exempt from shmir mula. Whereas an owner of a tam is not exempt from shmir mula. He has to pay, he would have to pay unless he watched it, a shmir mula, a very good watching. Okay. Tanya Rabbi Dovid Yehudah Rabbi Dovid Yehudah said, if you watched a minimal level of watching, potter, then you're exempt. One second. Okay. So according to Rabbi Dovid Yehudah, both tam and muad both only require shmir pchusa. Again, Rabbi Meir says both tam and muad require shmir ma'ula. Rabbi Yehudah says tam shmir ma'ula, muad shmir pchusa. It's a leniency by muad. And Rabbi Dovid Yehudah says both tam and muad shmir pchusa is sufficient. My time, what's the reason Rabbi Dovid Yehudah? Sover like Rabbi Yehudah. He holds like Rabbi Yehudah that learns from v'lo yishmerenu shmir pchusa. However, the yalef negicha tam v'negicha lemuad. compares the negicha of a tam to the negicha of muad. He says it's not just limited to muad. The exclusion of shmir me'ula, meaning the requirement to only do shmir pchusa, a minimal level of watching, applies both to tam and to muad, because tam is learned from muad. Okay, now we get to another fundamental gemara, which you've seen in the past. Amar Rabbi Dovid Yehudah says, "Lepoter Rabbi Yehudah el tzad ha'adah shaboy aval tzad tamas b'mkayma medes." Very fundamental. So let's say a guy, according to Rabbi Yehudah, and for argument's sake, we'll define shmir pchusa as a chain link fence, and shmir me'ula as, let's say, with the electric wire. So according to Rabbi Yehudah, an animal was watched. An animal that was a muad was watched in a chain link fence, and it goes and does damage. How much do you have to pay? So you watch a shmir pchusa. How much do you have to pay?
Full damage.
Zero. Because why?
Oh, because it was watched.
Because it was watched. Because according to Rabbi Yehudah, you only require shmir pchusa by muad. Again, if the animal was a tam and went out and damaged, you'd have to pay half damages. Why? Because according to Rabbi Yehudah, in order to exempt yourself from half damage, you'd have had to have the electric wire. That would be shmir me'ula. If you watched shmir me'ula and it went out and damaged anyway, so then you're exempt because you did what you could. But okay, so by muad, shmir pchusa, the chain link fence, it goes out and does damage, you should be entirely exempt because you fulfilled your obligation in terms of watching it. However, says Rav Ava, no. There's a difference here. What's the difference? Over here, we say tzad tamas b'mkayma medes, meaning we'd say we'll at least make you pay like a tam. So in other words, you'll still pay half damages. A muad doesn't abandon its tamas; it just adds to it. So a muad, you have an interesting combination here, where half the animal has to be watched shmir pchusa, the other half shmir me'ula. So if he only watches it with a chain link fence, it goes out and does damage. See, he's exempt from the muad side, but he's liable for the tam side. Okay. Now, Rav is an interesting statement, and the Gemara will eventually prove, just a few lines, that Rav has a weird, like an interesting take on Rabbi Dovid Yehudah. In English, he strongly disagrees with him. And he says that, yeah, it's applicable to a basically irrelevant scenario. Okay, let's see it. Amarav, muad lekeren yamin. If an animal's a muad to the right horn, the right, I guess the animal has presumably the ox has two horns, and the right side it's muad for. Ain't it muad lekeren smile? It's not muad for the left side. Someone says, what is Rav talking about? Amar liba deman. What's he talking about? Ia liba dermeir. Okay, in other words, presumably what Rav was saying is that if you watch the animal for the right side, you don't need and not the left side, then and it went out and did damage to the left side is a tam, you'd be treated like a tam. Okay, 1 second. Okay. 1 second, hold on. Okay. In other words, the Gemara presumes here that Rav is trying to make a distinction with regard to shmir me'ula versus shmir tam, versus shmir pchusa, such that the right horn has to be watched like a muad, the left horn has to be watched like a tam, presumably because there's a distinction. One of them needs a shmir me'ula, one of them needs a shmir pchusa. So Gemara says, if Rav is going with Rameir's opinion, Amar echad tam echad muad shmir me'ula by. According to Rameir, there's no difference. They both have to be watched equally. A tam and a muad have the same type of watching. However, according to Rabbi Yehudah, my area Karen Samuel feel be minami is b'tzad tamus. The isbe tzad muadus. According to Rabbi Yehudah, there would be a distinction. The muad side, you'd only have to do a shmir pchusa, but the non-muad side, you'd have to do a shmir me'ula, because according to Rabbi Yehudah, tam requires shmir me'ula, better watching. So Gemara asks, however, even the muad side also requires the same level of watching as a tam, because every muad is also a tam, according to Rav Dovid Yehudah. So Gemara says, Amr l'Adam Rav Yehudah. Rav is talking according to Rabbi Yehudah, and he disagrees with Rav Barava. Rav Barava is saying every muad is a tam plus a muad. Half the animal is still tam, the other half is a muad. What is this? Rav disagrees. Bavaka Kamma. This is what he's responding to Rav Barava. When you say that an animal could be both tam and muad at the same time, there's never a scenario that's possible. The only scenario that's possible is this weird instance where the animal is a muad on the right side, but not the left side. So the animal is both a tam and a muad simultaneously. But actually, according to Rav, if you have an animal that's a muad, and again, you put it behind a chain link fence, according to Rabbi Yehudah, and given the presumption that a chain link fence is a shmira pchusa and not a shmira me'ula, a low level watching, not a high level watching. According to Rav, if the animal goes out, it breaks, it jumps the fence, you'd be completely exempt. According to Rabbi Dovid, you'd have to pay the half the amount for the tzad tamus, for the side of the animal that's still tam. But according to Rav, you'd be exempt from everything because the animal is completely a muad. The only possibility where an animal is half a muad, half a tam, is if it's a muad for the right horn, but not the left horn. And obviously, it would never make a difference in terms of damages that you'd have to pay. Sort of, you'd be exempt from the muad, and you'd have to pay the tam. You'd either pay completely for muad or you'd pay completely for tam. Okay. Top of Mem Vav Aleph 46a, second line. Rabbi Elazar says the only way to watch an animal is with a knife. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, my time is Rabbi Elazar. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Elazar? Amar Kra, because the pasuk says, V'lo yishmerenu, and the animal will not be watched. Shuv ein l'shmir l'zeh. Once an animal becomes a muad, you can no longer watch it. In other words, V'lo yishmerenu, and you didn't watch it means you cannot watch it. It's impossible to watch it because according to Rabbi Elazar, the only way to watch a muad is to kill it. Right? They say in the mafia boss, what's the best way to keep a secret between three men? Two of them are dead. Right?
Where'd that come from?
I don't know. It's an old mafia saying that flies around New York. Okay. Okay. Abai says if this is the case that v'lo yishmerenu means it's impossible to watch it, it's effectively unwatched. Alamiato. So let's give an example of another verse. A guy digs a bar, he digs a pit, and he doesn't cover. Maybe means nami shuv ein like hisilazeh. Maybe it means that if you dig a swimming pool, it's not watched until you fill it up with earth and cover it up again. If you'll say hachanami, maybe indeed, once you dig a pit, you can never cover it. V'atanam we learned kiseu karoi. He covered it correctly. And somehow the cover got moved to the side, and an ox or a donkey fell into it. Umeis, and it died. Potter, he's exempt. So clearly, we see you could watch a pit, despite the fact that Torah says, and he didn't watch it. In other words, and he didn't watch it doesn't mean he cannot watch it. It means he didn't watch it. So presumably, when the Torah says that his ox wasn't watched, doesn't mean that he cannot watch his ox. It means he didn't watch his ox. So therefore, there's no source to say that according to Rabbi Elazar, it is impossible to watch a shar hamuad, a muad ox. Abai says, Rabbi Elazar, this is the reason Rabbi Elazar, like we learned. Rabbi Nosson says, a person should not raise a wild dog. I don't know if this means a pit bull. I don't know if anyone here has pit bulls, so maybe they're very upset at me if I say that. But allegedly they say pit bulls can never be trained. So that would be an example of a kelev ra, a bad dog, and you shouldn't have one in your house. It's not just a dog. If the guy has a broken ladder, so yeah, you might know the ladder is broken, but maybe somebody else in your house won't know the ladder is broken. You should not keep such a thing in your house. Don't keep blood in your house. This means that obviously if you have things that are going to be used in regular course, you have to be very careful that these things cannot shouldn't easily cause disaster. So, for example, I have a glove, a oven mitt with a hole, and now that I learned this Gemara, I have to throw it out instead of burning my fingers on it. Like you may have noticed, I burned my finger like a couple of weeks ago. But I had a band-aid on my finger. But that's an example of a kelev ra. You shouldn't have an oven mitt with a hole in it. Somebody's going to take the stuffing out of the oven, burn your finger on it. Something like that. This is dangerous. A broken ladder, especially, you take it out and you burn. So similarly, a shor hamuad should not be kept in the house. If you have a shor hamuad, you slaughter it. Simple solution. Okay. Next parak. Shor shenogach is a para. Benimtza over b'tzida. Classical Gemara. Okay. This Mishnah we discussed this a little bit in the past, and we're going to go through it again now. But we're talking here is what we call a suffix mummin. An event occurs, and there's a doubt as to what exactly happened. And the amount of compensation is dependent on the chronology of the events. So, for example, you have a shar, an ox that gores a cow. However, v'nimtza over b'tzida, but we find a fetus next to the cow. Cow is pregnant, and there's a fetus next to it, which is dead. Ve'en yedua, we don't know. Imat shaloi nagcha yolda. We don't know if the animal gored it while the cow, if the ox gored while the cow was still pregnant. Im mishnah yolda. I'm sorry. If it was, if the gored cow was miscarried prior to the goring, or imishana kayalda, or the goring caused the miscarriage. So mishalam chatzin as a kapara. So the cow, you have to pay half damages to the cow. That's simple. That's obvious. However, uravia nezek levlad, you pay a quarter of the damages to the fetus. We'll have to explain this in more detail. How do we get to the number a quarter? A little complicated. But regardless, the point here is that we don't know what happened. We don't know if the animal was gored first, in which case it's responsible for the miscarriage, or if the animal miscarried first and then the cow miscarried first and then was gored, in which case there's no responsibility at all to the dead fetus. So what do? We split it. We split the claim. And obviously, as you're thinking, you remember the Gemara from about a week ago or so. This is obviously sumchas. Sumchas says when we have a doubt, we split the result. Generally speaking, by the way, just very briefly, there are 3 ways to solve a problem. Okay, I'm sorry, there are 3 or 4 ways. We'll go through them one at a time. We'll figure it out. Number 1 is the classical instance, is what you're probably thinking to yourself in this Mishnah. Whoever wants to make a claim has to bring the proof. Simple enough. That's how you resolve a dispute. The second way to resolve a dispute is to split it. The third way to resolve a dispute is what we call kol da'alam gvar. Kol da'alam gvar means let the strongest man win. This is sometimes used. For example, there's 2 people. One man owes money to 2 people, and he doesn't have anything, and except for a couple pieces of property. Let's say he has a ship. Is an example from this example I didn't make up. It's a Gemara in Ksubis. I think it's not Pei Zion or Pei Vav, somewhere around there. Maybe it's a little earlier. Pei Gimel, something like that. Anyway, he has a ship. It's in harbor, and both of them want to collect the ship to pay their debts. So what do? They both race to the ship, right? In that case, the two scholars. One grabbed the rudder, the other grabbed the sails. Each one claimed that represents the control of the ship. Okay, good question. Who actually got it? But that's an example of kol da'alam gvar. The strongest man should win. Okay. And the fourth way is what they call shuda daini. Shuda daini is used, for example, the classical instance of shuda daini is where a man says, I'm giving a gift. The guy was dying, apparently. He says his last gift, his last final will and testament should be $1 million to his friend Tuvia. There's just one problem, which is that he has 2 friends, and they're both Tuvia. And they're both of their names is Tuvia. But I didn't make up this name. This is the Gemara's name. Nichsila Tuvia. So what do? So one of the resolutions is the scholars, they take circumstantial evidence. They each one tries to prove that they're the what they call the BFF, what they call best friends forever. And whoever is the real BFF, they get the money. Okay. So our Mishnah prefers what we call yachloiku, split the money. Okay. 1 second. Okay. Okay. And similarly, the opposite scenario. This is an interesting one. The cow gored the ox. The nimtza vloda betzida, and we find the fetus beside the cow. So what's the question here? The question here is migufay, right? The cow has to pay chatzin ezek from its total value. Well, is the total value a pregnant cow, or is the total value a non-pregnant cow? A cow that had a fetus, the miscarried fetus 5 minutes earlier. So then we don't know if it was before it gored that it gave birth. In this case, the fetus could even be alive. It wouldn't make a difference. Or once the animal was gored, the cow gave birth. In other words, in that case, the megufay is from a pregnant cow, which is presumably about to give birth, which presumably is worth more. So mishtalam chatzin ezek min hapara, you pay half the damages from the ox, the cow. I'm sorry, u'revi'an ezek min havlad, and a quarter of the damages from the fetus. And again, we'll have to discuss this. Another question the Gemara will have to address is, by the way, who owns? Is it the case that the owner of the cow owns the fetus? Could be maybe we're talking about a scenario where there's two owners. We'll get to it. Amar Yehudah Amar Shmuel. So Yehudah says in him, Shmuel Zudivrei Simchas is the opinion of Simchas. The Amar Simchas says, when we have a doubt on financial matters, what do? We split it. We make a split 50-50 in the value, and we give it to each side. But the rabbis say, this is an important general rule. If you want to lay a claim, then you must provide the evidence. So the Gemara says, well, okay, it's very nice that you make the point, which is, if you want to make a claim, you have to give the evidence. But why did you have to add on the words Ze klal gadol b'din? This is an important rule. Like, okay, thank you, appreciate it, but why is it so important? So the Gemara says, it's important to know this addition. And this is an important concept. To understand the intersection of these two concepts, we'll have to get to it in a later discussion. I think it might be later in Bava Kamma. It could also be in Bava Mitzia. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly where it is. Okay, what is this? This is Bori V'Shema. Bori V'Shema means a certain claim versus an uncertain claim. If you want to claim damages based on a certain claim, you still have to provide the proof. The fact that the nitva, what do you say in English? The defendant does not have, is unsure of what happened, is not sufficient grounds. It is not sufficient grounds to collect money. You still have to prove what happened. So in other words, let's say the mazik here, for example, says that I'm convinced. Again, what happened was the ox gores the cow. So the owner or the aggressor, he says, I am convinced, I know, let's say, that the animal miscarried before it was gored. So damages now are less. And the victim says, I don't know. Sorry, you gotta be the opposite. Sorry. The victim, in this case, you have to be the opposite, because the victim is making the claim here. The victim says, the victim says that the cow was pregnant at the time it was gored, and you're responsible for the miscarriage. The aggressor is responsible for miscarriage, and the aggressor says, "I don't know. It's not enough to collect. The victim must bring proof." Okay, so the Gemara says, "Inami." Another possibility of why this is an important rule. A guy sells an animal to his friend, and it turns out the animal is a nakhan. It's a muad. It's a wild animal. Rav Amar Harei Mekach Toys. Rav says it's a Mekach Toys, meaning the sale is invalid. It's a deceit, and you have to give back the animal and give back the money. Shmuel Amar and Shmuel says the seller could say, "I never sold to you for work. I sold to you as to be slaughtered." So the Gemara says, so let the Gemara explain first. The Gemara will go through the details, and we'll get back to the original question of why this is an example of a Maitzim Chaver or Olav Haraya. So Amai, why is this a debate? V'nechsi, let's figure it out. Igaver dezavan l'radya, igaver dezavan l'nechasta. Is this a guy that owns a Okay. Is this a guy who owns a cattle ranch for the purpose of slaughtering animals, or is he raising cattle and he uses them for work animals? Laradia is for work, Nechasta is for slaughter. So Gemara says, his cattle farm serves both purposes. He rears cows, he rears oxen for work, and he also rears them for slaughter. So the Gemara says, okay, well, we have another way to figure it out. Vinechsi, idme radia laradia, idme nechasta lenechasta. Right? You can tell by the price of the animal if it's a work animal, presumably it's more expensive than if it's a slaughter animal, presumably it's less expensive. So let's look at the sale price. The Gemara says, no, there was a shortage of meat, and actually the prices are pretty competitive. They're roughly the same. And the value of a work animal is the same. The value of a slaughter animal is the same as the value of a work animal. Okay. So Gemara says, "V'amri v'ilekel shtalumi minei lishklei l'tura bezuzi." Wait a second. So now the Gemara says, let's try to figure this out. If the guy doesn't have the money, the seller does not have the money, he spent the money. So what real difference does it make? The let's say he can't collect from the seller. So then lishkele l'tura, take the ox, bezuzi, for the same value as the ox itself. And the Amri Inchi, people say, when somebody owes me money, I'll take anything to collect, because better that I take something than take nothing. So exactly what difference does it make if the sale is valid or not? Effectively, he's reimbursed the sale by giving him the animal. Right? Like we said, right? Shavakesef, you can pay anything for Shavakesef. You can pay anything for money. So Gemara says, he still has the cash. So he doesn't want to deal with selling a wild ox. He wants cash. So that's why he wants to undo the sale. Rav says the sale is invalid. Why? Go by majority. Most people sell animals for work. Shmuel says the seller could say, you're right, there is most, but I'm of the minority. I sell for slaughter. We do not go by majority. Majority is a concept that relates to Isser and Heter, prohibitions, but it does not relate, according to Shmuel, to money. Now, I don't want to go into this too much. Obviously, it depends, because there are certain robes that we do go by. Typically, a ruba de less come out of a cheskes kashrus, which is another discussion. In other words, you can sell an animal. The presumption is the animal's healthy, which is potentially a rove as well. Well, it's not really; it's more of a chazaka. Okay, this is all for a different story, not for now. The point here is, by and large, we do not determine financial matters based on majority. Okay. And according to Shmuel saying, this is the important rule that the rabbis were saying. The important rule of Hamayis Mecharev of Araya is, even by majority, even if there's a majority presumption here that he intended on buying the animal for work, not for slaughter, you need to bring proof. This is the general rule. You need to bring proof. Majority alone is not enough. We have another bright that supports this. You have an ox that gores a cow, and there's a fetus beside it. A repetition of our Mishnah. We have a ox that gores a cow. There's a dead fetus next to the cow. We don't know if the dead fetus was caused by the goring or it precedes the goring. First, the animal miscarried, then it was gored. So Simcha says, you got to split it. We'll discuss the splitting tomorrow, probably. So it looks like now. But the rabbis say, if you want to make a claim, you have to bring the proof. And therefore, actually, you don't collect at all for the victim does not collect at all for the value of the fetus unless he can prove that the animal was pregnant at the time it was gored. Omer of Shmuel Bar Nachmani, or Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, Minayin lahamoitzim mechaver olav haraya. How do we know this general rule? The one who brings the claim has to bring the proof too. Shenemar mi baldvorim yigash aleim. The verse states, whoever has the claim yigash aleim should put it forth. Meaning Yagish Raya Aleim. He should bring proof to what he's saying. Okay, this obviously is not talking about financial matters. This is talking about what is it? This is talking about the sages after the Torah was given. And Baldvar means a question, but he's sort of interpreting it homiletically, referring to somebody who has a claim. Maskas Ravashi has an obvious question. Lama likra. Why do I need a verse? Savorahu. It's logical. The kov like evil ozla beasya. The guy who has a boo-boo goes to the doctor, right? The guy who wants to lay the claim, he has to prove that he has a claim when he goes to court to solve his problems. So the Gemara says you're right. A verse is needed according to Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Vua. Amar Nachman Amar Rabba Vua. Minayin she'ein eskaken ela letevet tchila. In other words, the verse is not necessary. The fact that the one who has the claim has to bring the proof is obvious. So what do I need the verse for? That we talk about the one who has the claim, he comes first. For example, two people come with a claim. Two people come in to the court. One guy says, this guy owes me $1,000. And the other guy says, yeah, it's true, but he's grabbed my collateral from me, and I want my collateral back. First, we make him pay the claim, and then we'll deal with the collateral. Because the verse says we deal with the one who has the claim. Nardoi says that's the general rule, but there are exceptions. Let's say the guy says, yeah, I need my collateral back right now because I don't know, the markets right now are very high, and if I sell it, I can get much more money. So it's sort of an urgent reason for us to provide the one who's being collected from, to provide him back with his collateral. In that case, we'll adjudicate that argument first, and afterwards adjudicate the claim of by the claimant. Okay. Have a great day.